Today is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. A Christian teacher is found guilty of unacceptable conduct for sharing biblical views on gender at a Christian school. Love that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, right to our inbox, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're glad you're here with us as we're getting through the news of the Cray each and every weekday, bright and early. And joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Tragon Phillips. On the focus story, an interesting look, Billy, at how British Christians look at Israel versus American Christians.
Yeah, there's some statistical differences, so we'll break all that down, get into some of those numbers today.
All right, looking forward to the details there. And on the main thing, we've got a growing crisis that's quietly unfolding in America. It's an interesting one, an aging crisis. Charlene Aaron's got the details on that coming up on the main thing. The news in 90 is up next, right after this.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem, and the city is restless. The people of Israel welcome Jesus as king, his followers ready for revolution. But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! How will you escape being condemned to hell?
Experience Holy Week like never before.
What have you done?
Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen, Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
And a Trump administration staffer mistakenly added The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, to a private Signal group chat discussing upcoming U.S. strikes on Houthi rebels. The group included National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Vice President J.D. Vance, and others. Goldberg published a firsthand account of the chat, watching from a parking lot as explosions in Yemen confirmed the thread's accuracy. President Trump called it a mistake, but said no war plans or classified info were shared. He's standing by Waltz, saying he learned a lesson. Critics are calling for resignations, but Trump says the strike was successful, and that's what matters. A Christian teacher in the UK has been found guilty of, quote, unacceptable professional conduct, end quote, after sharing biblical views on gender and sexuality while teaching at a Christian school. Gladys Ledger, a veteran teacher of 12 years, was suspended in 2022 from her school for refusing to promote LGBT ideology in class. Instead, she told students that Christians believe sex outside of marriage is sin and that we're all loved by God. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Now, guys, I know that in the UK, and Billy, you're going to be diving in a little bit more on the UK here in a few minutes. Like, they've had some kind of harsh treatment going on of minority views. Like, I guess a Christian view would be a minority view there now. It feels like, we've reported on people being barred from praying silently outside of abortion clinics. This one, it seemed like kind of a run-of-the-mill headline until the caveats in there that it happened at a Christian school. And it just makes you shake your head going, what is going on in the UK?
Well, and it's like, this word Christian, what does it really mean, right? Like, is it just some sort of term that's being used, or is it a real Christian school? And if it is a real Christian school, how in the world are these sorts of things happening? And why are we allowing the world and the culture to really become an impediment and to just invade the church in the way that it has? Lots of questions and statements there.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple things going on. I think there's that for sure. What's the definition of Christian? And obviously the definition of Christian should be one who adheres to the teachings of Christ, right? The teachings of the Bible. That should be what we define Christian as. But I think we've become increasingly loose with our definition of what it means to be a Christian. Even people just saying they're a person of faith. Really, you have to be careful, right? Because that could mean literally any number of things. I think another thing too is we're dealing, especially in the UK, but we're seeing this more and more in the US too, is this suggestion that our Christian faith is not only personal, it's also private, right? As evangelical Christians, we think that our faith is personal, but it's not private. We should be able to talk about it publicly. We need to be able to evangelize, share the truth of Scripture, and illuminate those truths to those around us, our loved ones around us. But I think increasingly the secular world wants it to be personal and private, right? Whatever you believe, you keep it to yourself. You don't share it with anybody else. And that, of course, is not our dictate as Christians, but that's how the world often wants us to live.
Yeah, it really is. And I couldn't agree more with that. We really have to qualify when somebody says it. It's unfortunate nowadays we have to define our terms. There's no longer you can't assume that somebody's on the same page as you when they say something like, well, I'm a Christian too. You got to ask them what they believe and see if they believe that Scripture is authority and is the primary authority in their life and things of that nature. You got to go down the line because you might think you're on the same page, but end up being completely on another planet. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now here and continuing our gander over to the UK across the pond. A new survey explores why British Christians have a apparently lower opinion of Israel and Jews than their American peers. So what's the deal here?
Yeah, so this is based on a Christian Post report. It's very interesting. Mitch Glazer, he's the president of Chosen People Ministries. He told the Christian Post that anti-Semitic perspectives could really have a negative impact on sharing the gospel. So before we get into the numbers and all of that, when it comes to sharing the gospel with Jewish people, he brings an interesting point up. If there's anti-Semitism or negativity, that actually impedes the ability to help the Jewish people see the truth. And he said he's hoping to help Christians navigate those issues and to stop really any anti-Jewish sentiment that might be out there. And he gave some examples. He said, I speak at a church in the South, and then some Christian will come up to the back and tell me how much they enjoyed my sermon, and then they'll make a joke about Jews and money. He said, they're my brother and sister, and I know they're ignorant, or maybe they really are anti-Semitic, at least on the trope. I love my brothers and sisters, and I just want them to not do that. So he's kind of taken on this mission of trying to address even these jokes that are kind of pointing to maybe some anti-Semitism. And it's interesting because Glazer was actually born in an Orthodox Jewish home before finding Jesus. And he's the one who presided over the release of this new study, a survey of British Christian attitudes towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That's one piece of the study. And then that data is being compared to another study that was done last year of American attitudes about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So what are we seeing in this data that's out there now? What does it show?
So overall, you've got 58.5% of American believers who have a favorable view of Jews, so almost 60%. But among British Christians, it's only at 50.6%. So there's a notable difference there. It's like an 8 percentage point difference between American Jews and British Jews. And then there's a larger gap when it comes to Israel. And this is really interesting. 42.3% of American Christians support the Jewish state, but just 23.6% of British Christians say the same. So you see a big gap there on Israel. It's a smaller gap on Jews, but a much bigger one on Israel.
What is the reason you think for the difference between the British and the American on this?
Yeah, this is interesting. One of the researchers who co-authored both of the studies that were included in this, Kirill Bumin, he said that frequent interactions with Jewish people and an exposure to their beliefs can often correlate with strong support for Israel, right? But here's a quote. He said, and he told Christian Post this: British rarely interact with the Jewish people, both in work settings and in social life, as well as in religious settings. Americans are significantly more likely to do so, particularly in those kinds of mundane interactions at work or in the neighborhood. So this idea of more exposure in America could be perhaps driving more favorable views of Israel and the Jewish people. Kind of an interesting thing. But in a culture that prides itself so much on, multiculturalism and being around other people, it's interesting that this is like such an issue still, right?
Yeah, it really is. Especially when you have a lot of the issues going on in Israel or in UK right now, with a lot of migrants coming in. We're seeing a lot of kind of extremism. I mean, it's kind of like almost a meme on the internet right now. The radical Muslim takeover of the UK. And like, it's just like, that is a thing over there. It's happening. So many Muslims migrating there. And, it's interesting because I don't know if that plays any role in what we're seeing. Maybe this cultural shift that's happening in the UK right now. But it's certainly interesting. And, especially given all the ridiculous hatred we're seeing aimed at Israel right now, in spite of them being the ones once again under attack.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I don't know if, Billy, maybe the survey kind of highlighted some of this, or even delved into it at all, but I would assume some of it is the fact that, Europe is largely post-Christian now, and we're still, the evangelical movement is still pretty strong here, at least in large parts of the United States, and a lot of the Israel support comes from the evangelical, conservative right here in the United States. So I think that's interesting. Just looking at their religious makeup of the two regions, right? In Europe, it's much more post-Christian, so they don't necessarily feel a tie to Israel. They feel a tie toward supporting Jewish people ethnically, but they don't have the religious tie that's motivating them to support Israel as a state the way that a lot of Americans would.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm sorry, final thoughts, Billy?
No, I mean, I think this data is interesting, and it's always important to kind of track and understand and see, what's going on. But I think you raise a good point there, Trey, too, and just how faith itself is being managed in these arenas and how it's being viewed even, because that will impact the way you see Israel for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Interesting stuff. Appreciate you bringing it to the podcast today. We're going to go here in a moment to the main thing and taking a look at why living longer could actually be leading to a crisis here in America. The details on that coming up in 30 seconds.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem. Crowds welcome Jesus as king. Rebellion is in the air.
Jesus operates outside our jurisdiction.
Rome will descend on us all.
But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of thieves.
The world will never be the same. Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
All right, America and Americans are living longer, but that extended lifespan is bringing some new challenges with life expectancy on the rise. Experts are warning of an aging population crisis that's already putting pressure on families, caregivers, and the healthcare system. CBN's Charlene Aaron has more details on this for today's main thing.
Life expectancy for Americans reached 78.4 years in 2023. That's nearly 11 months longer than the year before. This extended lifespan, though, has led to warnings of an aging population crisis that could affect seniors on a number of levels. For 82-year-old Alice Butler of Portsmouth, Virginia, growing older isn't easy.
It's hard getting older. We've all got issues.
In her case, that includes 84-year-old husband Paul's declining health.
It's hard because he basically has stroke symptoms, and as a result of that, he's slow processing things.
For their daughter, Lee Longino, still having her parents is a blessing, although providing support isn't always easy, especially with her dad's health issues.
It's certainly been a roller coaster with their health. I mean, I never knew my dad to be ill until, 2020, which is when he first developed a lot of these sicknesses that he's going through now.
Lee and her family live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which means regular 3-hour drives back to her parents' home in Portsmouth.
Traveling back and forth is expensive. Spending time away from my family. My husband has really invested in a job which is flexible. He has taken on that role of with our children to be there and to be flexible, pick them up from school, take them to the doctor's appointments.
It is a subject well documented by Dr. Hunter Baker, Provost and Dean of Faculty at North Greenville University. Baker highlights how today's modern family is often spread out across generations, living in sometimes distant locations, which means aging parents may not have immediate family assistance.
I actually think that the families of the past would have been better able to handle it simply because we had more intact families living closer to one another.
And the impact of this growing aging population reaches the federal budget as spending on Social Security and Medicare are expected to balloon.
We have gone in the 20th century when these programs started, we had huge numbers of young people and relatively smaller numbers of older people. And that situation has flipped on its head to where we have many fewer young people than we did comparatively and many more old people.
That makes planning for future care needs vital, as nearly 70% of Americans 65 and older will require some form of long-term care.
I could invest in a long-term care policy when I'm 40 and pay maybe $300 a month. And now I'm 50 and it's $700 a month. And now I'm 60 and it's $1,000 a month. And now I'm 70 and it's $2,000 a month. The closer I get to needing it, the less I'm able to afford it.
We are very, very fortunate and very blessed that mom and dad were proactive and put things in place for themselves in order to not be a financial burden on their children. And that is the only way that we've been able to do this and the way that we have been.
Dean Longo owns Visiting Angels of Norfolk, Virginia, a group that provides in-home care for area seniors, including the Butlers. Longo has seen the increase in families with older parents needing their services.
8 years that I've been doing Visiting Angels, I've just seen that number increase and increase and increase.
A situation that is often overwhelming for younger caretakers.
I was going to try not to cry, but you want to be everything to everybody because your parents deserve that. Your children deserve that. Your spouse deserves that. You really are pulled and have to make very hard decisions sometimes, and then make the hard decision and try your best to not feel guilty about it.
Baker adds the pressure of this additional responsibility being put on family members means support from a spiritual community is needed.
We need to start helping people to think about these kind of things in the church. And we also need to probably be thinking about how we can help each other in the church as we deal with these kinds of situations.
In the end, it's faith that sustains Alice and her family.
It gives us a peace about all of this.
There's been many, many mornings that I've woken up upstairs and I just needed to know that the sun was going to rise. And the sun rose and I was like, okay, we made it through another day, and that's just one day at a time, and that's all God gives you.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Interesting there, Charlene. Thanks so much for that. And guys, there's a whole conversation I think we can have on like, how do you care for your parents? I feel like the models that we've set up now, I feel like are probably, if you really drilled down on it, you could make a strong case that they're not very biblical, particularly like letting kids just run out of the house, like just kicking them out. I want to kick them out when they're 16, let them fend for themselves. And, of course there's some value to kids just getting out there and getting on their own. But at the same time, like everyone's complaining how hard it is right now, how expensive everything is. Like, why aren't we investing in kind of trying to set up our family to like actually help our extended family? Like, why isn't like the kind of middle-aged family helping the elderly in that family, like your parents? Like, why are you just shuffling them off and spending thousands of dollars to send them to some nursing home? Like, why aren't we, building bigger houses and building, additions onto our houses and taking care of them right there? And I know in some instances that are extreme with different health issues that might not be possible, but, to the best of your ability. But that would be an interesting, I think, topic to dive into at some point, down the road. I'm not sure if you guys have a reaction to that or not. I just kind of opened a can of worms there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just say, I think we need to be supportive of young people in particular during difficult times. There's nothing wrong with, you don't want to like make an excuse for people who aren't working or trying, but a lot of these young people are trying and it's just a tough time. So why not encourage families to set them up for success?
Right, let them work at home, save some money. Like, why is that like that? That was like a negative when I grew up. You were like looked at as like a failure if you lived at home. But I look at it now and I'm thinking, man, I would have loved to have worked with even my early salaries that I was making right out of college. How great would that have been to work for 5 years and not have to spend a bunch of money on bills and actually be able to save and get ahead a little bit?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, after I graduated college, I went home and stayed home for almost 2 years. And truthfully, that's how I was able to save up enough money to then purchase a house, several years after that. So I think there's value in that, but we definitely, I think, do frown upon that for younger people. And then also, America, Western culture, we're one of the few cultures that doesn't really prize the elderly, right? We don't really take care of the elderly the way that most other cultures do. So I think that's something that is unique to us, but I think it is worth examining, like you were saying, Dan.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting stuff, but glad Charlene was taking a look at that today. And we're going to have time on the pod now for one last thing.
Psalm 119:25, I lie in the dust, revive me by your word. It's just a good, no matter where you are, no matter what you're struggling with, turning to God for personal revival.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like a verse that reminds you that you are just dust without the saving and redeeming grace of God. But, it's true, and it's a good thing to hear.
Absolutely. Good spot to leave it on this Wednesday edition of the Quick Start podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. We're glad you're here with us each and every day, and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise. We'll be back here, same time, same place. God bless. See you then.